So then I get about 5 miles to the west of the airport and I get the most dreaded call that I think any pilot can ever get. All right, everybody, welcome back to Average Aviator. I'm Travis, and today we're gonna talk about a time that I had a wonderful little chat with the FAA. If you're new here, I'm just an average guy trying to make it in aviation, and I share some of my experiences and a lot of the things that I've learned over the years. So if that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing. So I know as pilots, we're typically supposed to act like we never do anything wrong or we're expected to be perfect all the time. But today I want to talk about an issue that I had where I wasn't necessarily perfect, and I want to share it because even though it's very difficult to share, I think that a lot of people can learn from this, and I want people to learn from my mistakes as well as be open and honest and the fact that I'm not a perfect pilot and I'm constantly learning, and it's okay if you are too. So about 2 years ago, I was flying from 6 Papa 7 McVille Airport in Pennsylvania to India 19, which is over by Dayton, Ohio, because I had something I had to do for work. It was a beautiful day. It was going to be a beautiful day for the next couple days. I could have drove, but I said, hey, I can't resist, so I chose to fly. I'm VFR, I'm not IFR rated, and I typically fly in and out of non-towered airports. I tend to avoid airspace altogether. But today, that route took me underneath the Class Bravo of Pittsburgh, and then it went directly through, essentially, the Class Charlie of Columbus. So I took off, I flew about 2,000 to 3,500 feet underneath the shelves of the Pittsburgh Class Bravo, and as I got closer to Columbus, I climbed up to 4,500 feet. So as I neared Columbus's Class Charlie, about 20 miles out, I was at 4,500 feet. I thought, well, hey, I could either climb up above the Charlie, but that would take time. I could also divert to the south of the Charlie, but that would take even more time. So why don't I just call them up and try to get clearance through the Charlie, and it'd be a good practice for me as well. So I called them up at 20 miles out and I got no answer. So I had some problems before with the radio, but it was only at, it was at 25 miles or so that people couldn't hear me. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm 20 miles, maybe they can't hear me. I'll just get a little closer, I'll call them again. So 18 miles, I call them again. Columbus approach, Mooney 6670 uniform. No answer. I can hear them, no problem. 17 miles, I call them again. Columbus approach, Mooney 6670 uniform. Nothing. I can hear them talking to other airplanes. I can hear other airplanes. I just figured maybe they're busy. Maybe they're just waiting to contact me. So 16 miles, I make the decision. I'm gonna call them one more time. If not, I don't have enough room to climb, so I'm just gonna divert to the south, climb, and then go above. So 16 miles, I call them again. Columbus approach, Mooney 6670 uniform. Again, there was not an answer at first, but I was thinking, it was a couple seconds after I had called them, they didn't answer, I'm going to divert to the south and climb up like my plan was. But then right as soon as I was gonna do that, I heard, Mooney 6670 uniform, we have you identified 15 miles to the east, 2,000 feet or something like that. I'm not entirely sure what the altitude was. And I thought, well, that's weird. I'm at 4,500, but that was my call sign, and maybe it's just my altitude encoder. Maybe they just have a different altitude. So I answered them. And I heard something along the lines of, 6670 uniform, change your squawk to 4664 or something like that. So I answered them back. 70 uniform is changing the squawk to 4664. So I say, okay, well, they gave me a squawk. I've gotten contact with them. I am cleared to the Charlie. So I actually turned slightly to the south. So then I went right back and went into the Charlie, and I was putting along all fine and happy, and everything was fine. And about 10 miles in, or maybe 5 minutes after that, I heard a call, Mooney 6670 uniform, change squawk 4665 or something similar. And I thought, that's weird. Why would they want me to change one thing? I was like, okay, 4665, 70 uniform, change my transponder. So then I'm 2 miles south of the Columbus airport, heading west, 4,500 feet, all fat, dumb, and happy, thinking that everything's great. I'm talking to ATC, and I hear this weird transmission. Aircraft 2 miles south of Columbus airport, 4,500 feet. Identify yourself, you are not cleared to the Charlie, or something similar. It's been 2 years, so I'm not entirely sure. And I thought, wait a minute, that's odd. That's exactly where I am. And then my heart sank. I'll never forget that feeling after that. My heart sank because I think internally I had known that something wasn't quite right, but I had been convincing myself that everything was fine and dandy. So I called them back and I said, hey, this is 6670 uniform. You've been talking to me the entire time. And then they could hear me and they say, no, this is the first time that we've heard of you. We have no idea who you are. Change your squawk code to this. Where are you headed? And I told them where I'm headed. And they said, okay, proceed on course. And I said, well, hey, I'm sorry. Like I thought you were talking to me. They said, no, we have a 570 uniform on frequency. So just be aware of that. So then I get about 5 miles to the west of the airport and I get the most dreaded call that I think any pilot can ever get. Mooney 6670 uniform, possible pilot deviation. Let me know when you're ready to copy. I didn't know what to do. I just scrounged around for a pen and paper and I said, ready to copy. And as they gave me the number and then I tried to read it back, I was maybe 6 miles or so. They couldn't understand me. 6 miles out, they couldn't understand me. I could hear them, no problem. I got the number. I tried to tell them, hey, I got it, but they couldn't hear me. So I eventually just hit the ident button because I didn't know what else to do. And they got the ident and they called back and say, hey, we saw that you're identing. We're assuming that means that you got it. So now I'm shaking and I didn't know what to do. My mind is racing, but I continue on to Indy 19 and I land. And the most embarrassing part about this, I think, was that the line guy, they'd called the airport ahead and said, hey, when this plane lands, make sure you get him this number, because I guess they didn't trust that I hit the ident button for that. And so the line guy meets me at the airplane. He said, hey, we got a call. You're supposed to call this number when you get on the ground. And so that was pretty embarrassing. So what's ironic is I've taken an aviation law class, and in that class, they make it very clear that you do not have to call the number. You don't have to incriminate yourself. You do not have to give them your information. It is the FAA's job to prove that you are the pilot flying and that you did something wrong. Do you think I listened to that advice? Of course not. I get on the ground, and instead of doing anything else, doing research, I call the number because my head is going a million miles an hour. So I call the number. The controller was obviously very upset and he was not empathetic at all. And then he asked for my information, and me trying to be compliant and say, hey, I didn't mean to do anything wrong, I give him the information. So I get the airplane tied up. I still had to do this thing for work. So I go to the hotel for the night and I call a bunch of my mentors, two specifically, and asked them what I should do. And they pretty much said, just file a NASA report and you just have to wait. So filed a NASA report with all the information that I've told you. I submitted that within hours. So the next night, it was very difficult to sleep. It was very difficult to focus on work the next day. I was just so insanely paranoid. I thought the FAA might just bust through the door at any moment. Of course, that's not how it works, but I was just so shaken up by this. So I was debating on even whether to fly home, but I figured, this is really the only way I can get home. So I took off, but I avoided Columbus like the plague. I went way to the south to avoid it all. It took way longer to get home. I landed fine, and I put the plane away, and I pretty much hung up the plane for the next 2.5 months, or maybe more, like 3 months, because I was so shaken up by the mistake that I had made. Part of it was I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything right before I got back into it, but the other part was that I was just so afraid of messing up, and that I was just waiting on the FAA to just come crashing through the door for about 3 months that I just decided it was better not to fly. In those 3 months, I sent the radio out to see if there was something wrong with it, because obviously the range wasn't working. So I sent it out, and they sent it back to me, and they said, well, pretty much, we didn't really find anything wrong with it. We replaced a couple of capacitors, but there was nothing that was really wrong with it. And I was like, that's weird. What the heck is the issue? And it wasn't until I did the annual during those 3 months that I found there's an antenna on the bottom of the Mooney that is kind of like a whip antenna, and it was cracked, but you really couldn't see it. I mean, you could, if you looked really, really close, you could see it. It was cracked, and the only way that I found it was I was actually dropping that panel to see if the connection was still on on the antenna, and as I dropped the panel, the thing just kind of fell apart. And I'm not entirely sure how the antenna got broken. I don't know if it was a rock from some of the airports that I go to, which are essentially just gravel, and came up and got flung by the prop and hit it, or if me just being a ham-fisted idiot crawling around underneath the plane had hit it the wrong way and it just cracked and came loose. But the antenna part itself was loose in its housing from the cable, and that's what I think caused the decay in range as it worked loose. And after I replaced that antenna, it worked beautifully. The radio and everything worked wonderfully. So one of the other things that I did while waiting for the FAA to call me is I contacted AOPA's Pilot Protection Services. This is not sponsored at all. I have no affiliation, but if you're not a part of AOPA's Pilot Protection Services, I highly suggest to become a member and that you subscribe to the Pilot Protection Services, because in an event like this, and you think, oh, it would never happen to me, but that's the way I thought as well. It was an absolute amazing resource. I called them, I told them exactly what happened, and they couldn't really do anything to help necessarily my situation, because it had already been done. I'd already given them all the information. I called them after the fact. In retrospect, I should have called them the moment I landed so that I got some good advice on what to do, but I had already kind of set my path, and there was nothing that the legal team there could really do about that. But even in that situation, they gave me a huge peace of mind knowing what was, what could happen, what my best options were, and not to worry about it necessarily. So definitely, if you're not a part of that, definitely consider it. It's an awesome resource. And I can't speak highly about it. So the incident happened in February, but it wasn't until May that the FAA finally contacted me. And I think the delay actually helped because it let me figure out exactly what had happened. I did some retrospective looking in to see exactly how I contributed to the incident and what I could change for the future. And then I was able to present that to the FAA when they called. I was expecting a guy that would just hammer me and say, how stupid could you be? This is all the things that you did wrong. You understand, this is the judgment that we make against you, and this is your punishment. But it didn't go like that at all. That's not at all what happened. It was a woman who called me, and she was insanely nice. She was like, put me at ease. She just asked me to explain what happened, and I explained the situation, and I explained all the stuff that I had learned. Hey, this was some of the stuff that I maybe could have done better, and this is kind of why I was thinking. And she just listened, and she asked a couple things, a couple questions at the end about fatigue. Ultimately, she said it was really due to a mechanical failure that you didn't know about, and so I'm gonna mark this as, something like compliance action, no further action necessary. I think you did all that you needed to, and you learned your lesson. You weren't actively trying to disregard the rules. And that was just so astonishing to me, because I was expecting the hammer to be dropped at any given moment for about 3 months. And that's not at all what happened. And so it was such a relief. So there's 3 main things that I took away from this incident, and I'm gonna share them with you guys because hopefully you, or at least one person, can learn this the easy way, because I learned it the hard way. And I'll tell you, if you can learn it the easy way, it's so much better than learning it the way that I did. So the first thing that I want you guys to take away is set yourself up for success. And what I mean by that is try to follow the regs as best as possible, not cut corners, not intentionally forget about certain regulations just because it's convenient. It'll set you up way better for when you do get into that situation that you make an honest mistake. If you're cutting corners and you're getting away with it, it might not even be your fault that you get discovered, but if you do get discovered, it's gonna be way worse for you than if you had set yourself up for success. The second thing that I learned that I really took away was a lesson on confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, I think, was one of the biggest players in my specific incident, and it's something that I didn't really think about until after it happened. A confirmation bias is essentially hearing what you want to hear or perceiving something based on what you want to perceive. So when I was hearing the radio calls, I was wanting it to be my end number, and it was close enough that my brain or myself just kind of put it together and heard it as my end number. Even though I think internally I knew that wasn't necessarily mine, I just kept going as if it was because that's what I wanted it to be. And that's a really big thing to keep in check, because, you know, even it could be perceiving radio calls, it could be doing actions, it could be making a turn, it could be doing anything based on what you're expecting can lead you into a lot more issues than if you just take the time to realize exactly what that radio call was or exactly what that direction was instead of what you think it is. So confirmation bias is something that we definitely need to be better about. I think I definitely needed to be better about. If I was more conscious about it, I think I might not have made the same decision. So definitely keep your confirmation bias in check. And the third takeaway from this was that everybody makes mistakes, and to try to be a little bit more, I don't know if lenient is the right word, but just understanding towards people that mess up and towards situations like accidents or whatever, because you're not in that situation, you don't know what's going on, and you never know when you're gonna find yourself in a similar situation. So definitely have some empathy towards people that mess up, and then also, you know, just keep yourself in check. You know, if you haven't made a mistake, it's either because you're not trying hard enough or you just haven't been caught yet. And so, because nobody is perfect, even though us as pilots kind of have to, you know, think that we have to have this aura about us that is perfection. And it's great to strive for that, but also, you know, don't expect everybody to be perfect all the time, and don't get yourself so down when you make a mistake. Just take the mistakes as lessons, try to limit them as much as you can, but when you do make mistakes, learn as much as you can from it as possible. And that will be the key to continuing to grow in your aviation career. So this story is kind of difficult for me to talk about and put out to the whole world for them to see, because maybe it makes me look like a crappy pilot, but honestly, it's way more important for me to be actively sharing my story and trying to prevent incidents in the future than to not share my story and act like I'm this perfect pilot who never makes mistakes. But that's my story. You can do with it what you will. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below, or you can message me directly, Average Space Aviator on Instagram. And then if you think that I've earned it, you can leave a thumbs up. But that's all I got. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you.